Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
I'm Faye.
And I'm James. So, Faye, we're back together again. How was your week?
It was very good, and welcome back. I missed you as always, doing the long news read all on my Jack Jones. But no, it's great to have you back. So my week, very busy. I spent quite a lot of time heads down on prep for our Startup to Scale Up launch, which will come from the Cambridge Management Consulting team on November the 20th in your fair office. So we'll be there in the auditorium in my adopted second home, and I'm really looking forward to it. We had a big session with the managing partners this week on it, and there's such passion for it, because if you think about what we've been doing for the last decade, Cofinitive has built stories and built brands and told stories of our startups across the ecosystem. But what Cambridge MC does is it brings in all the other bits that we wouldn't normally touch. So all those challenges of scaling, whether it's funding, operations, tech, IT stuff, everything in between. So I think it's really exciting, and it's going to be interesting. I think we'll have over 100 people there and see what the reaction is, but it seems pretty positive. So I've got a month to get everything finished. That's loads of time, right? Easy.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah.
Got nothing else on, have you?
No, gosh, no. What else? So I did a Chamber of Commerce board meeting, and we've got 2 new board directors there. So there's some really cool stuff happening. Most of it launching or happening around the CAMS B2B event, which is the day before the Startup to Scale Up launch. So that week is going to be, I probably won't be able to speak by the end of that week, it has to be said. And then it was the Innovation Cambridge Summit. Did you go?
I did, yes. I was there. Okay,
so I'll share some of my thoughts and observations from it, and then see what you thought as well. So we talked on the news about Sir Andy Hopper and Common AI. So that was quite strong on the AI side of things, and he was really talking about the need for collaboration. There were lots of other conversations about the tech business landscape, a fair amount on inclusive growth, which I thought was really positive. Personally, I'd like to see impact. I'd like to see some tangible results coming through as well now, because they have been going for a number of years. Sir Nigel Wilson, who's chair of Cambridge Innovation Capital, suggested that UK tech business success will be funded by international capital and therefore not UK capital, which I think was quite a challenging debate. I'd be interested to know what you thought of Roxanne Barza, who came over from Station F in Paris, talking about how people go to venues and offices for who they can get access to. And I think this is it's really key. It's important. That's what you do at the Bradfield Centre. Yeah, of course, it's an office location, but it's way more than that, isn't it? And, we'll talk about the funding in the news that was announced at the conference as well. Yeah, so I think overall it was, the good and the great were there from across the UK, from civic, from business, from funders. So I think it was really well represented. So it was a good job from Catherine and the Innovate Cambridge team and the broader team. So how did you find it?
Yeah, I think you've done a really nice job summarising it there. And as you say, great job by the team to deliver it. It's just nice to see momentum, right? We've talked a lot about Innovation Cambridge and the need for Cambridge to get better at promoting itself and being, more open to business. So the general direction of travel is super positive, I think. Hopefully it's constructive kind of feedback. I think they probably tried to cram a little bit too much content into the day, and coming so close after Cambridge Tech Week, I think maybe focus just on the stuff around the role and remit of Innovation Cambridge rather than more kind of general conversations about AI and things like that, because Cambridge Tech Week does a great job of covering that kind of stuff, right? But that's just a minor thing. It was a good event.
It's exactly, I think, what Innovate Cambridge and others are trying to do, which is join up more. And, maybe it's going to be an ongoing activity, isn't it? So what else did you get up to?
Yeah, so as you say, back from my little week away in Austria, so I'm just catching up with the inbox. But I guess the main focus for me this week was Trinity Bradfield Prize. So we just announced our 2025 talk series with a whole range of really interesting local founders. So I'll quickly rattle through them, but obviously, audio is not the best way to deliver this kind of information. So do go to the competition website, which is trinitybradfieldprize.co.uk, to read all of this and register. So all of these events start at 5:30 in the evening, and they're all hosted at Trinity College. So on the 4th of November, we have Finding Product Market Fit and the University Entrepreneurial Journey, and that's with John Doherty, who's the founder of Orcascan, who's been on before, Steve Marsh, the founder of Geospoc. Then we've got on the 12th of November, Raising Venture Capital and How to Plan an Exit with Yusi Young, who's the founder of Leon's and previously at Charco, who again has been on the show. And then we finish off on the 19th of November with Intellectual Property, everything you need to know about securing your IP, and that's with Rachel Daniel and Christine Penny from IP21. So as I say, all of that is on the competition website, and you can also find it on the Bradfield website as well.
Perfect. And just sorry to interrupt you there, James. I'm just thinking Steve Marsh. We've got to get Steve on.
Yeah, I will keep hounding him, definitely.
Come on, Steve. Okay, let's move on with the news, because there's quite a bit today. So we've already alluded to the first bit. Chancellor Right Honourable Rachel Reeves unveiled a pre-budget £500 million investment package. And this wasn't just for Cambridge, it's actually the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. So pledging to create thousands of jobs, new homes and transport links to help turn the corridor into Europe's Silicon Valley. Science Minister and Oxford-Cambridge Innovation Champion Lord Valence, who also spoke at the Innovate Cambridge conference, said this region has all the ingredients to be the UK's answer to Silicon Valley or the Boston cluster, somewhere that turns world-class innovation into economic growth the whole nation benefits from. Today is proof that we'll back Oxcam region to its full enormous potential. And we wholeheartedly agree.
Is there going to be a massive grant coming to the podcast, hopefully? But yeah.
I'm sure that's in there somewhere out of the 500 million. Yeah.
Well, we'll maybe leave a couple of million for everyone else. That'll be fine. So news from science park company Immaterial Limited, who are an advanced materials and engineering solutions pioneer. They've raised $18.2 million in a scale-up funding round, and we spoke to them back in episode 63 about their proprietary technology platform, which is suited to a diverse range of industrial applications. The round was led by SLB, with participation from a range of other backers.
Great news for Material. So next we have graphene-based electronic devices pioneer Paragraph, who are partnering with Intratomics Advanced Material Technologies, a subsidiary of Khalifa University Enterprises company in the UAE. They will jointly develop advanced graphene-enabled sensor solutions. Simon Thomas said, partnering with Intratomics allows us to leverage their advanced capabilities in material synthesis and functionalization. Together, we will accelerate the deployment of graphene-based sensors into real-world environments, unlocking new opportunities for both companies and driving global adoption of this breakthrough technology. So with this announcement and the recent closure of the company's Series C funding round and other international partnerships already announced, Paragraph expects to make further announcements about new international facilities in the near future.
Lovely. The University of Cambridge's Entrepreneurship Centre at Judge Business School, spearheaded by Anne Davison, who's another person we've asked to come on, so I'll hound Anne as well, is formalising its relationship via an MOU with Hong Kong University and the HKU Techno Entrepreneurship Core to build a corridor between the two ecosystems and develop mutual activities and mentoring to support respective ventures. The Entrepreneurship Centre is also seeking to establish a similar corridor in Chile.
And last, a nice piece of news, a little celebration for Cambridge Science Centre, who are toasting a decade-long partnership with locally headquartered and globally influential company AstraZeneca, a collaboration that has enabled and inspired thousands of children across the region to explore the wonders of science, technology, engineering and maths. So it's a great example of collaboration between parties and something that's really important for our next generation. So well done to both of them.
Excellent. So let's move on to this week's interview. We catch up with Owen Thompson, who's the CEO and founder of Cambridge Future Tech. And it's our second interview with Owen. He came on back in February 2024. So it's a great opportunity to catch up with CFT's progress since we last spoke to them. So, Owen, welcome back onto the podcast. You're one of our exclusive list of people that are having their second appearance. So welcome back on. Can you believe it was February 2024 when you first appeared on the pod? So we're really excited to catch back up and hear what's been happening at Cambridge Future Tech since February last year.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. A lot has happened in that time, I think. So it's quite interesting to catch up.
Awesome. Well, for the new listeners that may not have listened to that first episode, should we start with just a quick recap of Cambridge Future Tech's history and your model, which I think is really interesting?
Yeah, so we've been going for about 5 years now, and essentially we're a venture builder or a venture studio, but not in the conventional sense. We bill ourselves as a uniquely tech-first venture studio in that we don't do the kind of large talent gathering exercises and run residentials and pair groups of entrepreneurs together, because our view is that would produce lots of B2B SaaS companies, or at least it probably wouldn't produce the volume of deep tech startups, which is what we're focused on. And so we have a very proactive model where we go and do tech scouting through university and corporate research groups across the UK and a little bit into Europe and the US as well. And we go and look for the best technologies to solve the market needs that we're trying to solve at the time. And then when we find those within the universities and we find the technical talent associated with those, we proactively spin them out, conduct all the IP transfers and build companies around the technologies that we're finding. We're at the stage where we're building 8 to 10 companies per year, and increasingly working with corporate partners on those as well, which is quite fun and probably a bit of a difference from when we last spoke.
So, hi, welcome back, Owen. And just a shout out as well, I did listen to the previous episode because I was being a good podcast host and refreshing my mind. And actually, your background and BA systems and things like that was actually a really interesting conversation. So I do urge people to go back and listen to that episode too. But let's talk about, you've just mentioned 8 to 10 companies. Yeah, I think the last time we spoke, you had maybe 8 companies. You were looking at building to, I think, 14 by mid last year. So where are you up to now? Are you hitting those numbers? Are you finding it easy to find that level of company?
I wouldn't say it's easy. That's probably why we do it, because I think it solves a particular niche that is incredibly difficult. But the volume of intellectual property is there, and the potential for liberating that into real commercially viable ventures is very substantial. And so yesterday we incorporated our 17th company, and we've got another 3 in the pipeline that will be ready before Christmas. So we'll be up to 20 by the end of the year.
That's brilliant. And I think last time we talked about Minion, I think we mentioned Mimicry as well. Autopicker we got on the BBC for Cambridge Tech Week as well. So what new companies have you got coming in there? Because I think last time we also spoke about different sectors and your focus on quantum and battery. Is that still the same, or has that changed at all?
Yeah, we're very broad on deep tech. I guess it's easier to say what we don't do. We tend not to engage in pharma. We don't have the right expertise. It's already very well supported, different type of funding profile. So we very broadly focus on deep tech. At the moment, things that are interesting for us are future of compute, and that covers everything that you could possibly think of within that umbrella, including quantum and quantum enablers. We're very interested in data centers at the moment. We're very interested in cooling technologies. We still look at advanced materials and a few other interesting bits around that. Energy's always been a topic, energy storage, energy optimization. And we've got a company spinning out of Sheffield University doing, for instance, porous silicon anodes for electric vehicles, which increases the range and efficiency.
Right, so you mentioned data centres there, so let's just go on to the corporate venturing side of things, because you just made a recent announcement with a new venture.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I originally, partly because of my BAE Systems background, was looking at corporates as a source of IP, knowing that a lot of those corporate research groups are at the cutting edge as well as the university research groups. And so we were looking at them in terms of like, could we find some intellectual property that could be spun out that was slightly closer to market, or had slightly more IP, or had a different type of commercial potential? And the first one of those we did was a spin out from Nokia Bell Labs, actually here on the Cavendish site in Cambridge. And that company, called Omnibuds, has just closed its funding round, for which I'm sure there'll be some press coming out in the next few weeks. But that was a really interesting experiment for us. There was a lot of IP. It was very close to market, all the things that we assumed we would possibly achieve in that type of thesis. But in working with those corporates, we realized that some of our strengths, and particularly the tech scouting work that we do, was very interesting to them, and that their ability to interact with the deepest of deep tech back in the research group stage was something that we could support them with. And so over time, since we last spoke, we've ended up doing quite a lot of work with commercial partners in order to tech scout and do spin-outs for them, almost as a service. And that has grown into the stage where we're now, in the new year, we'll announce for a FTSE 100 company a full white-labelled venture builder that's going to run for the next 5 years that we're running on a contract. So it's grown from looking for IP into working with them on tech scouting into now we have kind of products, if you like, which are venture building as a service or running a completely white-labelled venture studio on behalf of a corporate partner.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because there's that complementarity, isn't there, of what you're doing initially with the pre-ideation phase to the corporate venturing. Has it changed the balance? I mean, you don't have to answer it if you don't. Has it changed the balance of how Cambridge Future Tech actually operates?
I think a lot of the tech scouting themes are very aligned anyway, but what it does is it gives us a more particular view on a market pull for a specific need. So an example might be we set off on a project last year to work with Anglo American. And the idea was that these large mining companies are producing a lot of iron ore. That iron ore is used to produce steel. And so they have these offset issues where they need to decarbonize the steel sector. And so we were running a task for Anglo American to look for a technology that could decarbonize the steel sector. And there's a real moonshot of a technology that was emerging from Birmingham University, which is a closed loop carbon system and completely removes CO2 from the steel furnace process, which I now know is 7 to 10% of global carbon emissions. So it's quite a substantial issue and quite a substantial technology if it can be commercialized. And so we set about spinning that out on behalf of Anglo American into a company that's now called Pericycle. And we've actually followed through and invested in Pericycle ourselves, as well as we've ramped up our own investment capabilities. And so there's a really nice example of where we had a point problem given to us by a corporate partner where we know there's a substantial market pull for a specific solution, and we're able to go and find it, spin it out, build it, and then get it through its initial fundraising round.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. And a quick supplementary, which builds off of Faye's last question before I move to the next topic area. Do you have a kind of, in your strategy, do you have a mix of, what percentage of the company is working on corporate venturing versus university IP? I mean, obviously, you've just explained there it's very complementary, but, do you have a view on how you're going to deploy your resources over time, or are you not working in such a rigid kind of way?
So I think generally where we're doing the tech scouting, we're majority looking at university research groups with a small amount of corporate research groups. If we're doing it with a corporate partner, generally we're focused on scouting into the universities. And one of the things that we're now very proud of, and we're not shy about saying that we have built within the team back here in the Bradfield Centre in Cambridge. We've got a team of 20, and we've got the UK's leading pre-incorporation tech scouting mechanism. And that's become very potent for us. And we're almost assimilating far more data than we utilize when we go out on those very long and very labor-intensive scouting exercises where we go about those university research groups in person, talking to the PIs and the students and learning what the state of the art is across certain verticals. And we're building up a mass of data across the UK and beyond about where the edges of technology are going in certain thematics. And that's been something that's been very valuable to us, that it took us almost a while to realize the value of. And so it's very reinforcing going through that process.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll come on to that later in the conversation because we'd love to get your insights in terms of what you're seeing around the UK. So we were talking there about universities. So, since we last spoke, like I say, coming on for maybe 18 months ago, I'd be really interested to understand how your university relationships have developed over that time, because I guess you've now had that track record of, proven success with spinning this IP out of certain universities. Your reputation's growing, there must be better brand awareness in the university market for what you can bring to bear. So, how's that developed over the last 18 months? And has the way you work with universities changed over that time?
Yeah, it's exactly as you say. So I guess an increasing brand awareness and sort of if you like, reference customers, and having worked with enough tech transfer offices that we've become very trusted. We're essentially helping to solve the KPIs for the tech transfer offices in locating good technologies in their ecosystem and then liberating those through the tech transfer office process. And so we have got to a stage where we've got probably now over 25 relationships running with leading academic institutions in the UK, and that's become very productive for us. It's not a challenge for us to build a relationship with a new tech transfer office. I think what's important to highlight really is that when we're looking for a technology to solve a market need, we aren't geographically constraining ourselves in a particular part of England or a particular type of university. We will go to the very best research groups, wherever they are, to look for that type of technology. And thus, we've ended up spinning out quite a few companies across the entire country. We're working with universities as far north as Glasgow and as far south as Southampton. And at the moment, we've got active spin-outs coming through the pipeline from Hull, Sheffield, Imperial, and several others. So we're running 5 or 6 spin-outs concurrently, all from different universities. And we're actually doing one at the moment in quantum reservoir computing, which is a collaboration between 3 different universities. And it's our job to grease the wheels on that process and to help negotiate the best structure for the company and something that works for the TTO and something that works for the founders. And so compared to a VC that would come in at the pre-seed stage, there is a lot more work to be done in our process, and it's very resource intensive in that early stage, but it's also incredibly satisfying when we're doing, for instance, the first serious and large spin out from Hull, who haven't done one of those before, and that's great and will capture headlines and is really nice for us because that's where we found the technology we wanted, in that case to do with data center cooling. And so we can work with any academic institution, whether they have a tech transfer office of 100 people or 1 person. We see that full spectrum of transfer office types. It's very satisfying for us to be able to liberate technologies that might not otherwise exist, and in doing so is very complementary along the way with the work of the universities.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking on the pod about one of the panels at Cambridge Tech Week where Northern Gritstone were giving some data on just the very low percentage of UK venture capital that goes into Northern startups. I think from memory, it was something as low as maybe 3%. I might have got that wrong. I'll have to go back and check. But so the fact that you're working with a lot of kind of Northern universities, is that purely just you're finding the tech in those places, so you'll just go where the tech is? Or did you feel like strategically that made sense for you because those startups, those ecosystems are underserved by the venture capital industry?
The only strategic move we made was to not limit ourselves to any small number of universities or part of the country. And so the fact that we've ended up doing quite a few in the north, and actually we work very closely now with Northern Gritstone, and Faye, you mentioned Mignon there, which is now, since we spoke last, has been renamed Literal Labs, and Northern Gritstone led the £4.7 million round for them, which closed in December last year. We're working on projects with Northern Gritstone. They've been a great partner, and it's important to have organisations like them in the north, because where we aren't geographically constrained and we are going for the very best tech we can find, we do need the ecosystems in place to support the spin-outs as they emerge. So that's been quite interesting for us. But no, we didn't particularly build a strategy of focusing on the north. It just so happens that there's been quite an even distribution of where we've spun companies out from geographically.
I mean, I like that you're not restricted. So, you have the broad brushstroke on the tech, but you will go where you need to go. So I think that's a good thing. That's something. It must be quite challenging for you, though, as an organisation, because if you're just working with a couple of local universities, you don't have to do quite so much engagement. Whereas when you're working with many, it's got to put more pressure on the team.
I mean, it's fun though. We've grown the team here and people want to work with us and for us because it's enjoyable. So we've got people out on the road constantly. This week we've had a team fly over to France to support the Series A round of one of our corporate partners in a startup that they're invested in. We've had team in Hull yesterday. We had people down in London looking at a spin out. We've got people all over the place. And so one of the things I really like about our model is that we're not constrained to receive applications. We're not a passive organization. We are out in person everywhere all the time speaking to people. And I think it's quite fun. And I think it gives us an edge that's very difficult to replicate because it is very labor intensive. But as long as we have the right kind of people that enjoy that work, and as long as we're willing to travel, one of the interesting things is that when we're looking at a new company, that geographical distance of how far do we need to travel and how often do we need to go in order to create a robust commercial venture, we had told ourselves that maybe 6 hours door to door would be the limit of what's sensible for like having to do a few trips every month. And so we can just about get to Glasgow, but that also releases us into parts of Europe. And when there is something further afield, I guess what we're learning is that actually with certain bursts of in-person and with the companies coming back this way for events and for networking, you can actually get quite a lot of face time in there as you build the company.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the portfolio. So you just said Literal Labs just raised their next round. Where are you up to? Because I know the first time we spoke, it was, you know, they'd done a first bit of investment and it'd be maybe a little while until their next round. Where are you up to on that journey? Because I think you said it was like a 10-year game before you knew whether the model actually worked or not. So how are you getting on with some of those portfolio companies?
Yeah, I do remember saying that to you, like, it's a great model because it'll be 10 years before we even know if it's successful or not. But I think we have a lot more data now and we can pretty robustly say that it's looking good. And I'm really happy with the progression of the portfolio companies. I guess we'll talk a bit about talent later, but Literal Labs is a really good example. It's going back a while, actually, Faye, to the last time we spoke, where we had just put an SPV into Literal Labs to get it moving. And then we ended up hiring in Noel Hurley, who used to be head of the CPU group at Arm, to come in and be the CEO of that project. And Noel immediately put his own stamp on it and turned it into a very, very rapidly commercially viable setup. And hence the rest of the round ramped right up to 4.7 million, which closed at Christmas. And they're rolling into their Series A round next year, which will be substantial because they've done very well in the interim with paid proof of concepts and commercial traction. So Noel is actually out in the US in November, out looking for new investors for that round next year for the Series A, and I think he's already got good traction on that round. So Literal Labs is a really nice example of one of the early companies that we did that is doing very well. More recently, we've had, as I mentioned, Omnibuds, that company from Nokia Bell Labs that we spun out, that closed its round yesterday. I won't give away too much on that one, but that one is in the millions as well, and that's a very large pre-seed round. They've already got commercial contracts, and they're dealing with organizations out in the US as well. So they've got good market access. So we've seen lots of interesting things happening across the portfolio. And I think it's fair to say now that we're very satisfied with the traction, but that talent, you know, it's obvious, but the talent that we bring into the ventures is so key and so important to the success of those companies that it's become a real focus for us.
I think that's definitely the point I wanted to come back to. So getting someone like Noel involved, you know, using the team that you've got, how does that work? How do you make the most of the talent to get your portfolio companies where they need to be?
One of the things that we have learned about our own model, I think, is that we assumed we would be spinning out lots of PhD level projects, but actually the area where we have the most applicability is where technology has been developed over a long period of time and it sits up at professor level. And where we're dealing with those PIs, perhaps they're not readily going to leave their academic tenures that they've been working 20 years towards building. And that's really, really interesting part of our model, in that for the most part now, when we do a spin out, we can access the richest seam of IP that otherwise wouldn't have an exit route. And what that means is that we're building a company like we did with Literal Labs, where we have the engagement of the academics, perhaps for a couple of days a week each through that IP assignment contract with the university, but the rest of the team sheet is clean and we can form a team from scratch. And that means that we can bring in either an experienced CEO from industry or an experienced second or third time founder who's been through the ringer a couple of times. And we can handcraft the team such that the CEO is very commercially minded. We used to very clearly sit on the fence of this whole debate about whether academic founders should lead their own projects. And we were very neutral on that. I guess what we found from our experience, almost because of the way that we structure the companies that we build, in that the academics might be staying where they are, it means that we've very firmly fallen on the side of the fence. That is where we bring in a very commercially minded and experienced CEO. Those companies see success much more quickly. They generate much more traction. And so I feel like our model is quite nice in that sense, that we get to create team sheets from scratch. But it does mean that we've had to become a bit of an exec recruitment firm, and that we've had to do a continuous wave of global CEO recruitments. where we're looking for people within certain industry sectors or people with certain founding experience. And that's been a steep learning curve for us to learn how to get like the very best people very early on who are interested in putting the next 5, 7, 10 years of their life on the line to dedicate themselves to a new project that could create or disrupt a market. And that's been really fun. And it means that we've been able to deal with a lot more talent. We've been able to source lots of very interesting founders. And actually, we've recruited for an internal talent lead now. So we're just running all that internally, but we do still work with recruitment partners as well.
Well, that was going to be my supplementary, actually, just to kind of, drill down on that, because you talked about how, the data that you're gathering from the innovation happening in universities is a USP for you. But it strikes me that this talent function is also like a bit of a USP for you as well. I mean, every conversation we ever have on the podcast, in our day jobs, every event we go to, the number one issue for everyone is always talent, without question. So, as you're developing this kind of skill, you've kind of just said there that you're actually hiring someone in to run this. So are you bringing in recruiters to become full-time employees of CFT? Are you partnering and outsourcing that capability? How are you actually doing that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, we do have a whole stack of recruitment partners that we work with when we're out looking for talent. But honestly, the best talent that we've found has been organic, where we have been looking for expressions of interest, or perhaps where we've already been validating a technology and doing commercial outreach and learning about an industry. We build a network in doing that process. And in undertaking that process, you kind of it's more than just the CEO that you hire. It's the talent around the startup and the support to that organization and the contacts that they have, the advisors that you can bring in, and the support structure around the core team. You're almost building like a mini ecosystem around each startup as you go through it. So there's the bit where we're scouting, where we're already building a massive industry and research group contacts around a topic. And then there is the part where we start to go and actively recruit for leadership. And then we will meet so many interesting people through the candidate process, maybe one of which or two of which will go on to become executive leadership within the company, but others will still stay there, perhaps as board members or advisors or just trusted contacts. And through going through the recruitment process, it's not like we're being a recruiter. It is actually part of building a company and building the strength around that entity, in building that extended team and that support structure and that knowledge and that network. And so it's quite a fun activity to go about. Building a company isn't just sourcing the tech and transferring the IP into a governance structure. It's actually building a mini ecosystem around a topic and creating momentum and narrative behind it. And that's been a bit of a learning curve for us, but it's also been incredibly rewarding. And then when we go on to do other companies in adjacent spaces, we have already built network around the fringes, and we can lean on people we've met before who had good insights into these areas, and very quickly it becomes quite self-fulfilling. Just yesterday, we were in London with a small team of people that we're forming around a new company that we're doing in quantum reservoir computing. And, just absolutely stunning to observe the kind of collective bringing together of minds into a workshop to understand the potential of this technology and how it could be structured and which parts of the market to approach first and how to go about that. Once we've got the right talent in the room, we can almost kind of just sit back and marshal the conversation. We are never going to be at a higher level of expertise in a given sector than the people who've already been working there for 10, 20, 30 years across startups and industry. And so once you can bring those minds together and you can marshal that conversation and create the right governance structures to give them all the right compensation and bring them in, you have not a leader that you've recruited to bring a project forward. You've got an entire team around a topic that can drive it with momentum. And that's just been incredibly satisfying to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting listening to you describe that, because, I mean, in many ways, your business is very people-driven, isn't it? It's all about relationships. At every kind of intersection you've described in this conversation so far, it's all about the quality of those relationships that you're building.
Yeah, and that's really true. And I think we've known from very early on that we're not a tech company. We're a people company, and that's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer in what we do. So we spend a lot of time looking at angles around narrative and PR and structure and people and relationships. And that's really the core of what we do. That's the core of what the team does.
And, maybe to kind of move on to just exploring the model in a little bit more detail. I know we kind of touched on it at the beginning of the conversation, but as you say, because you're not maybe in a kind of more traditional recruitment sense, it's more transactional where, there's a search, someone's placed, there's a fee and everyone moves on to the next opportunity, right? Whereas you guys are obviously nurturing these companies within your portfolio. So you've got that extended relationship as you described. So how long typically do you kind of envisage one of your portfolio companies staying within that kind of support structure before they kind of fly the nest? Have you got a kind of view on that, or is it very much case by case basis?
Yeah, I think they are all different, but on average, we will spend a few months doing a tech scouting exercise. We'll then spend another few months diligencing a project and starting to build network around it. So we've been working on a project, full time for 6 months before we bring in any external team members. Then we're going through that team building exercise, that external recruitment, if you like, type function and composing the leadership team. Then there is a phase where much of the data behind the diligence for the company and much of the spin out process and the governance is already in place. And we'll be working very operationally with the leadership team that we bring in up to the point that they close their first big funding round. So if they bring 3 or 4 million in through the door, at that stage, they'll have their own team and they'll have their own board. And we should really be stepping back at that stage away from operational execution into strategic support. And so we'll still be with the companies and they're in our ecosystem. We run sequences of events and training sessions and various things that you would expect from a venture studio, but also with our team in the office, we'll be doing active commercial outreach. We'll be supporting the initial hiring of the team as that leadership team have their capital to start to deploy into, say, a team of engineers and start to try to hit the milestones that they proposed. So we're still kind of very active, but we're stepping back into more of a strategic role at that stage. We'll usually retain a directorship in the company so we can help structure the board through those first couple of years. But largely, the point at which they have raised a big round is the point at which we step out of the company operationally. And that's quite an interesting transition within our team because we might have been embedded in that project for a year and we're very emotionally engaged in the success of that company, but we're still shareholders, we still have a director seat, and we're still inherently tied to the success of that company. We don't see anything in terms of payback with our business model unless the company does well and exits in 5 years or what have you.
No, it's really interesting. And you're investing as well as building these companies, right? You're actually investing into these businesses as well.
Yeah, and that's something that's been a big change, I think, since we last spoke. So we weren't really doing investing. We never really had any ambitions of being an investor when we last spoke. But at this stage, we have started more actively investing. We've done investments off a balance sheet, like with Pericycle. Even in the last month, we've been pushing through a sequence of SPVs. So we've started doing some quite large investments, anywhere between 100 and 500k, through an SPV that we can pull together from our network and then place that in. So for the Omnibuds round that closed yesterday, we were the lead investor on that round. And that's been really nice to see that we've been building up that track record and that experience because investment was not our core thesis when we started up. But we really do have an increasing volume of expertise now in making investments and in pulling together investors to the point at which what we'll see early next year is our sister organization, Future Tech VC, start to actively deploy as well. And that's being set up in the background as we speak with the view that it will support those companies and other external companies as well through to the seed and Series A rounds, so we can have a slightly longer support period.
I mean, it's just exciting to hear just how many moving parts there are inside CFT. There's so much going on. It's incredible. So it's impressive progress. And before I kind of hand over to Faye to talk about kind of trends and what you're seeing, you touched there briefly on the kind of support and programs that you offer to the portfolio companies as well. I know you put a lot of time and effort into that side of things as well. So maybe you could just quickly walk us through, how your support services have matured since we first spoke. And I guess there's the portfolio support that you do, but also CFT are quite visible in the Cambridge ecosystem and wider in terms of the community events you're putting on to build engagement and awareness. So talk us through your kind of approach to community building.
I think we've taken the view since we started the company that we would always prioritize collaboration, and we would always try to be as much a part of the ecosystem as we could in as helpful a way as we could. And what's particularly useful on that is that we're engaging with the venture lifecycle at a point where there's, we're not really competing with other organizations in the ecosystem, rather we're feeding them. And I always said that it would be no surprise if we created a company that then we housed in an incubator, that went through an accelerator, that received VC funding or SEIS investment group funding or angel funding. And so there's no part of the ecosystem that we couldn't work with in that venture creation cycle. I think that we've proven that through, Mimicry, you mentioned earlier, received investment off of Deep Tech Labs last year and went through their program. We've housed companies in the Bradfield Centre and Eagle Labs. So we're creating companies that kind of feed the rest of the ecosystem. And in doing so, we're trying to be a very helpful and collaborative aspect of the structure. But more so just in Cambridge, we're trying to do that nationally. And that's where we're working with people like Northern Gritstone. Or last week, we ran a pitch event in the Shard for all of the VCs that could make it down to London for that day to show off our 6 newest companies. I think that we've done our best to try and do that. We've in-housed PR resource. I think you both met Grace already. And so we've got a lot of effort going into comms and strategy and ecosystem to make sure that we can support other organizations around us. And that goes for the corporate partners as well. And I think what was really cool about our pitch event in the Shard last week was that we usually run these events and we have lots of VCs turn up. But with this one, we had a major showing from tech transfer offices. We had a major showing from corporate partners, which was really nice, and they could all meet each other. And we're starting to understand the power of that ecosystem and how we can build on that and how we can make the most out of supporting all the organizations around us for kind of a shared goal, essentially.
So, Owen, I have to say, I think sitting here listening to you, we listen to loads of and talk to loads of startups. It's like we're having a conversation still with a startup as well, and you are sharing everything. So I think it's just a great conversation. So thank you for being so open about it. And just, going back to the previous episode, so February 24 to October 25, then you were saying, we think we're going to run our own fund, and now look at the things you're doing and launching it as a separate VC asset. So absolute kudos to you. So because you're being so open and transparent with all of these learnings, let's just keep digging a little bit longer from you. So like James has said, what trends are you seeing? So you've got some great relationships with VCs, with family offices. We know that there's still a little bit of a glut because there's the lack of liquidity events coming through. So what are you finding is happening across the UK? What's your experience?
It is a difficult fundraising environment. People will always say that, but it does feel difficult this year for the ventures to raise. One of the angles, and you mentioned there things like family offices, one of the angles that we take is to produce a fundraising strategy for each company that we build, and they're never really the same. Some of them need an SEIS fund with some angel groups to support. Some of them will go straight in with a huge VC ticket and then need co-investors. Some of them will do an SPV to start the round off, and then they need some more on top of that, either VCs or angel groups. It's like there is no set fundraising strategy that is uniformly applicable across all ventures. And we really put a lot of time into understanding for this type of company and for its future capital requirements and for its current requirements, what strategy will gain the most traction in this environment. And I do highly rate working with family offices. I find that actually there is a bit of a perspective sometimes that VC money is better, is good, smart money and the VCs have got experience and they'll follow on and those sorts of things. But for me, some of the family offices we deal with, and some of the family offices are huge, far bigger than the VCs that we see in the UK. They are inherently entrepreneurial. The reason they are family offices is probably because they've started and run a multitude of entrepreneurial ventures themselves. And actually the benefits that you can have from having family office on your cap table, the support and the insights they can give you, the flexibility and the network contacts and the industry contacts that they have is phenomenal. Some of those family office investors are incredibly sophisticated. So I really love working with family office. We've got family office on our own cap table, and that's good for us as well because it's patient generational capital, and our model takes a year or so longer than a normal VC model would. So I really rate putting time into developing a fundraising strategy for a specific company for what it needs and then trying to execute on that. And I really rate working with a variety of different types of investor, whether that's angel investors looking for SEIS allocations or whether it's large VC funds or family offices. There's so much out there. It's just about pairing the right investors with the right startups.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it tallies really nicely with the conversation you just had with James about building the community and being part of the ecosystem. So that's the good stuff. Tell me some things that are not so good, or maybe some areas of weaknesses that you're seeing?
I don't know. There's a well-known issue at the moment in the UK, which is growth capital for the later rounds. But there are some really good initiatives being formed around that. So the Mansion House Act and the work that's being done on pension fund allocations into venture, and the work the British Business Bank is doing to restructure and do direct investments, whilst also creating a vessel to channel some of those pension fund investments into the growth phase through BGP and initiatives like that. So I feel like that's gradually moving forward in the UK. There's some very positive movement there. But of course, for a very large semiconductor project or something like that, they're going to want to target the appropriate markets anyway. And what we have seen some of the portfolio doing is the Delaware flip out to the US, particularly if they have West Coast investors that have supported them in their early rounds. And that's for market access. It's because there is more growth capital investment over there. And so that's probably still an issue, not in the UK, across Europe, that we need to find angles to create more growth capital.
And we've talked about sectors and the different areas you work in. You've talked about quantum, you've talked about battery tech. Is there anything that you're watching out for at the moment, that you see as a next big opportunity for you?
I mean, defence is always a topic, but we don't do too much proactively around defence yet. We might do next year, but we're only really interested in dual use. Defence as a sole market is very difficult. And we're not interested in kinetics and weaponry and things like that. We're very interested in intelligence and systems and data and training and simulation. So there's a lot to be done on defence, and there's an increasing need for that. I think that in terms of technologies we're looking at, quantum is becoming an increasingly pertinent topic for us. And that doesn't necessarily mean building a full quantum computing stack, because the first wave of quantum companies in that regard have passed. We're looking at second wave quantum opportunities, quantum enablement, things like EDA for quantum reservoir computing, topics like that around the edges of what's going to be important next. We're looking at the control systems layers and things like this. And we're very interested in those types of topics. I've mentioned data centers, and we've got a few others that we're looking at as well. So we're very broad, but it also depends particularly what corporate partners we're working with at the time.
I mean, as Faye said, it's been an amazing conversation, and we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing the insights. I'm sure people listening to this are going to want to reach out and have a conversation. So, are you hiring at the moment? Are you looking for partnership opportunities? How do people get in touch with you?
We're always hiring. We have an increasing volume of work that we're outputting at the moment. We've just expanded the office. We've taken on maybe 5 people in the last quarter, and we'll probably take on the same in the next quarter, maybe more, depending on the types of projects we're looking at. We are always open to partnering, and one of the initiatives that we've got going on at the moment is, I mentioned to you that we're going to be running a white labeled venture studio on behalf of a FTSE 100 partner in the new year. But I think what's also really interesting to us is trying to bring in more than one partner into such an initiative. So we've set up a few thematic venture studios that we're currently looking for partnerships into. One is focused on future of compute, and what we would look to do is to bring in 5 corporate partners or VC partners and similar, and we have already got some of those lined up in order to be able to produce a venture studio that will focus purely on future of compute over the next 4 or 5 years, supported specifically with those venture partners. We're also looking at doing one called Deep Rack, which is focused on data centers, and a 5 gigaton venture studio, which you can imagine what that one's focused on with sustainability. And we have already set up partnerships on all of those, and we're just looking to fill them out with more corporates and other interesting partners that want to work with us on those. And then those will deliver venture building services purely onto those technical verticals or those sector verticals where applicable.
Yeah, sounds really exciting. Thanks again for your time, Owen. It's been great to catch up again.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Faye.
Thank you.
Today's show was produced by Carl Homer of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner, Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.